Hey, Task family, it's your girl Tracy, and I'm here wishing you a happy World Autism Day. Thanks for joining me. Oh my goodness, everybody's been asking me about this podcast. I said, life been life when we've been trying to do this podcast. We did a couple of tapings, but we're trying to do the podcast. We talked about the topics, what we're going to do. But since it's World Autism Day, I thought it would be the best fit for us to log on and say hello to the world. So you introduce yourself, my love.
My name is Wauneka. I am a educator, but also an advocate for autism because my son also has autism. I do have a mini podcast myself, and we thought this would be a great collaborative for us to just be, two moms really touching base about what is it like about this life and how it is to manage, having a individual that needs support from us that has a neurodiversity. And we've been advocates for quite some time. And I feel like, yeah, because all these changes, especially that we've talked about, we feel like it definitely needs to be across.
I just felt the need to reach out to you because our sons became friends at
Yes.
their schools, and we're going through this journey. And sometimes as an autistic parent, you don't have someone to really talk about, what you're going to, what you need, what resources are out there. And we would always talk to each other about resources every different stages of our children's life. And I said, who better to be on this podcast with me than you?
Mhm.
It's been a journey. It's been a journey. Seeing them go from middle school to high school, and having now to transition to adulthood and what that looks like.
Yeah.
So I felt that there was just a need for us to come on and share with parents, because our kids are most likely not to get services. And now that it's 1 in 36 children, that says a lot.
Right. And it's funny how you said that it's like 1 out of 36. So we see as the numbers are increasing, decreasing. But especially where we are right about now, like we're in an area where we as parents and individuals who do have the experience know that every services that they're getting ready, that they're receiving now is something that they need. I can't enough express how those services actually change, and I saw the transitioning of his improvement. And sometimes I probably didn't even see it. It was others just doing that, how dedicated I was and working on with Tristan and finding that correct service or even setting.
Mhm.
And then to see that being taken away for, like, it's really very much a blessing to see that Tristan had an opportunity to have those services, but now for the little kiddos that are, now being discovered of the service that they're required is being taken away. That is very scarce. That is much of a concern because how can these kids develop in the best ability of themselves if those services is not offered or restricted in a way?
Let's talk about the diagnosis.
Mhm.
What age was your child diagnosed? Was Tristan diagnosed with autism?
So Tristan was diagnosed at age 5.5, and the thing about it is at that time you didn't have the opportunity. There was an opportunity to be like, okay, you feel like it was some of the concern of early because honestly, your tuition kicks in, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew it from, I want to say, from the time right before he was turning 1 or even at 1, like
Mm-hmm.
parallel development, also seeing some changes. My thing even today is our environment and everything around us probably played a huge, impact of that. I've seen how he was prior and I've
Mm-hmm.
seen what changed.
Exactly.
The worst part was when you have individuals who definitely meant well, but also at the same time individuals as professionals, for his physician to dismiss it. And it was something that really was of a bother. And it took one of my closest friends that told me, she was like, you know what? She really suggests another physician for me, that she was taking her kids to the pediatric.
Mhm.
And by the time I went to that pediatric, he gave me the paperwork, and that's offered. You take the one sheet for yourself, and you fill it out, as well with the schools or daycare, because at this point it was daycare. And you see the views, and you go to your evaluation, and yes, he was diagnosed at 5 officially.
You brought up a very important thing. Our doctors, because I remember saying to my doctors, something is wrong.
Hmm.
And they dismiss what we were saying.
Absolutely.
We constantly dismissing us,
Hmm.
and the ability to go and get a second opinion.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, we don't want to deal with the diagnosis. We know something is wrong. We prefer to stay in it and not go and get the. Our gut is telling us something is wrong.
Hmm.
We know that something is wrong. But when it comes to autism, in order for your child to really get to independence, early intervention is key. And we know that that ends at 3. So before that, at 1, I remember at 2, after, I just remember him just going blank.
Hmm.
He wasn't speaking anymore. This flat affect wasn't talking to us.
Hmm.
All he would do was stim his hands. He would hide. He would jump. He would just constant stimming.
Hmm.
And I knew something was wrong, but then when you're dealing with your family, because sometimes the topic of autism and disability is taboo, we don't want to talk about it. Back then, no, we didn't know who to talk to. At least, you had a friend. I didn't tell my family that my child had it. I didn't even talk about it. They knew about it when I released my book. Unfortunately, a few of my friends knew,
Hmm.
but I didn't tell anybody. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know what to say. And I'm a social worker. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I was being told all these different things, but how did you deal with the diagnosis?
So for me, how I dealt with the diagnosis, it was a relief, but also it was definitely frightening at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
because you are constantly questioning yourself, because you feel like something's off. You feel
Mm-hmm.
like something's not quite right. But then at the same time, you're eager to just know, like, I need confirmation.
Yeah.
um so with my experience, to like adjust with that experience, I do have a sister that has autism. So there were certain things that was aligned, certain things that I did see that was similar. And based on my experience as a sibling, I felt that if this is my child's life, I will like to help develop it. Now, it wasn't easy. I'm telling you, there was a lot of like cry in the dark, in the closet, like in tears, as in like, what did I do
Yes.
wrong? Where do I go? How can
Mm-hmm.
I assist my child? Because um, when my sister was diagnosed, she was diagnosed at a later time too. But I did notice that if I help him, that was the key for to myself. If I could help him, maybe I could put him in a better situation where my sister is. So I had to push through my pain of
Mm-hmm.
being a failure, as a parent, because as you said, like, some people, you just didn't know how to communicate that with others, nor did you felt like there was a connection with others to understand that your child is on the spectrum, while their children may not be on the spectrum. And I did have a friend. It's just that that friend did came sometime later.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was around, and as you said, like, she did not reveal about her child being on the
Mm-hmm.
spectrum until I think later on, when I mentioned that Tristan was in a D75 setting at that time. And then that's when she was asking me, let me just talk more about that with you. And then she shared that her son was on the spectrum too. And that led into, like, now when he's going to junior high, she mentioned about Stephen. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how to take him in. But for me, it was definitely perseverance. My goal was that, I needed him, and my desire was to have him to live at least the best feeling life that he could ever have.
We went from getting the diagnosis, dealing with telling people about the diagnosis,
Yes.
accepting it, because often acceptance, I always tell people, you have to mourn that child you envision that you
Hmm.
thought you were going to
Yes.
have in order to to me, Trey was the best thing ever.
Yes.
He has taught me so much resilience, patience, just seeing him push through it. And I'm looking at him from the beginning to now. I remember one time he came home and he couldn't tell me what was wrong, and he was having his moment. And I'm like, oh my God, is this how it's going to be for the rest of his life? What can I do? What can I do differently to help him to ensure that he has independence? I just wanted to ensure that he was independent. He was able to function. I didn't want my daughter to have the responsibility of having to deal with him, um, and not putting her life off. I see a lot of kids having to put their life off, and it's revolving around that sibling. And I wanted so much to ensure that she was independent, that she would be able to go to college and not worry about Trey, and Trey would be fine. So, I'm totally in support of exposing them, as you said, exposing them to different things, exposing them to traveling. A lot of people that I've spoken to, they don't take their children out, because of the behaviors, because of the stimming. I'm like, okay, let them stem. They have to live, they have to be exposed to the world in order for them to adapt to certain things.
Like if he stems, it's okay. I tell him when he stems, but I'm like, also be aware as you're stemming.
And you know
Like,
what? That's the form of communication. And that's what I used to tell people. That's their form of communication. They're excited. Even now, Trey has a moment where he cannot explain something. And I know he's about to stem and he's getting excited. I'm like, okay, all right, what is it you want to say? And, for me, it is important for them to let that energy out. It's important for them to express who they are. And exposure is so important. Inclusion is so important. So bringing out there, Trey always told us he wanted to go to Italy. So from the time he said, I want to make pizza in Italy, I was like, pizza? I said, oh my God, may God help us. The fact that he wanted to do that, I wanted him to have that exposure.
As you say, I think even in our last taping, we just mentioned like there's like so many trials as you get to the point that it's like, okay, where do we move on? And the first two is definitely a struggle. The
Yes.
acceptance, because before you get to acceptance, there's
There's the
denial.
denial,
There's
and
denial.
there's anger, and
There's anger. It is guilt.
guilt that you don't sleep at night. You're like, what did I do wrong? Did I not eat this? Did I not take this?
Oh
Why?
my
I felt like for a while I was like, why am I being punished? I was going back to God. I said, God, what did I do? I
God.
was going back to God. I couldn't understand. I said, I know I did everything that I was supposed to. I felt a sense of guilt. And I also felt like I was being punished. And I for a long time, and I had to go back to God and apologize, because here we are now as educators, helping parents. I don't know for you, but my son, he changed me in a way that I'm totally different, totally different.
So the fact that we see that you're allowing an individual who has been aid of all this time to solely be independent, it's scary because you don't even know or they don't even know like what decision they are
No,
making and to lead them into unnecessary, agreements. So yeah, it's very scary. It's something that I feel that yes, parents or guardians who are not aware of definitely needs to understand what are the steps I need to take, what are areas that you need to consult with, because
mhm,
you are again the biggest advocate to that
mhm.
individual. There was no manual,
None,
there was no guidance, but it was
none.
more that
No sensory toys. All of these stuff that are available now, we did not have it.
didn't have
Nothing.
them. it was the same for me. I feel like the individual I am today is because of Tristan. You know,
Exactly.
understanding, learning. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was more like just like a gut feeling to give a try. You know, no one told me there was no podcast, okay? There
None.
was no podcast, there was no talk show.
No
There was
children's book that had
no
representation of our
book.
babies. It was trial and error. It was trial and error. Trial and error. We really wasn't getting the information.
Mm.
Tend not to get the information. We tend not to get the resources.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is a platform, honestly, I don't even see much of. I do see platforms regarding to like, when it's early intervention and it's like definitely early childhood. But I think this is definitely excellent area to speak on because there's a lot of parents that is probably on their way
Yes.
or want to even be educated on,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when my child gets there, what do I do? What is my next steps? What can I offer or what is there offered for them?
Yes.
It may not look the same for
And it's
everyone.
not.
I do have a lot of family members who are now moving on with their kids to college.
Mm-hmm.
Some got, scholarships and who are going to leave home and live in dorms. And these are exciting moments. But then there's areas that you have children who are in the spectrum and it may not look the same. And it's not saying that they cannot live that, but then it's knowing where your child is capable
Mm-hmm.
and not capable as of yet, what is comfortable for them,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we manage them to successfully have a lifestyle as they go to adulthood and how we could get them there.
You hit the nail. You hit the nail. I tell everyone, every child is different.
Hmm.
Every child is different. I wanted Trey to understand his diagnosis and let him know his diagnosis does not define him. It doesn't define you. When we started on a journey for transition, we spoke about transition schools, we
Absolutely.
spoke about vocational schools, and we also spoke about colleges.
Hmm.
Um, Now, with all that's going on with this DEI, a lot of people don't understand it. You know, it we have schools that Trey has applied for, and they're telling us, well, at this time, we will no longer have that supportive program that assists adult with autism. We're now at this stage where we fought so hard to get him at that stage, and here you're telling us that this supportive services might be removed.
Hmm.
You know, Now I have looked at transitional schools and I have looked at culinary school because at one point Trey wanted to be a chef. So on Saturdays he takes these culinary classes. He wants to be a chef. He also loves computer science, constantly learning, constantly pouring into it. I tell him, I say, hey, you got into a few schools, this is your life. People
Right.
saying, what is it you want?
Right.
What is it do you want? Do you want to try transition? I said, even if you start college and you don't like it, this is our backup plan.
Yeah.
The backup plan is to have an updated IEP to ensure that you can go back to a transitional school. You won't be a part of New York City's IEP no more, but we want to ensure that your IEP includes your psychological is updated, your physical, everything is updated that you can go to a transitional school because once you turn 18 and you decide to no longer you get the diploma, you can't go back and say, I want to go in an IE program. You
Right.
can stay at schools. There are schools that can extend up to 21. That's another decision. That's another choice. But as I said, I wanted exposure. I wanted exposure, and everyone looks different. It looks different. And with us, we're always sharing. I'm like, okay, did you hear about Access VR? Did you hear about these different programs? We're constantly sharing, even though our kids may look different and at different stages, but they're still going to get to that stage because we're sharing and we're ensuring that they have a life and a future and they have those independent skills.
Absolutely. And they deserve that,
Yeah.
And I love the fact that they have that opportunity. Like, for example, there is a local school, Kingsborough. Kingsborough do support individuals with autism.
Yes, they
So it's
do.
not that they're not capable to apply for college. It's just that college look different. And then, I'm also big in like encouraging Tristan that if you want to try just one class, that's
That's
fine. You know,
all.
And if we're not prepared for that setting, then yes, if we still want to stay in the high school setting, but then we're no longer focusing on the academics now, we're focusing on courses with lifestyle classes.
Mm-hmm.
And then also applying yourself out there, as in working on him applying for a position at work. What does the application look like?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the constant educating them never ends. So I feel that, this is a very interesting and very scary
It
time.
is scary. You're going to take one class. I said, and if you decide that you don't, we have this transitional program. We have the Access VR that we also applied for. We did all these different things because just to have a backup plan for him to say, hey, he might say, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And that's his life.
Yeah.
We're there to guide them, but now their voice is very important. It's
Yes.
very important to allow them to say, okay, I'm an adult. He did tell me that the other day. I'm 18. I said, listen, he did say I'm 18 now. So I said, oh, you're 18? I said, okay, so since you're 18, let your 18-year-old self start ironing these
Uh,
clothes that mommy
listen,
was
okay,
helping you
I'm telling
to
you.
iron. I said 18. I said, okay, since we're 18, I was still helping him with certain things. I said, well, you're 18-year-old, so we will not be doing these things no more, these chores that we were assisting you.
Yeah.
He does make up his bed. He does know how to wash his clothes.
Yeah.
He does know how to do, but the ironing, try to, I said, well, 18-year-old, let me show you again how to use the iron and journey on to iron since we're now 18.
Find it very interesting how sometimes they keep certain things in and they don't
Yeah.
share. So it's always like having those questions. Like I have to dig deep with him rather than just saying like, "How was your day?" It
Yes.
was just, "What's the best part of your day? What did you find interesting? Or what irritated you today?" It's something I piggyback off when family meetings, when we had Sunday dinners at some of our family house who now lives in Georgia now. But I used to always love when we used to ask each other, what is our high, what is our low, and what ours are huh. So
Yes.
now I had to kind of like use that in a way of like asking for his date because he was just so like short with it. And I was like, Tristan, how was your day? He was like, it's fine. Like,
No, it's fine means there's something is wrong with them. There's something wrong. I feel like you have to dig in. It's more than it's just fine. So you have to find other ways to catch them. Like, okay, it's fine. Are you sure it's fine? And you have your, you know what to say to him to say, hey, let's dig in and find out what's really going on.
you have to, especially working on social emotional
Yes.
cues and having conversations. So him not having those conversations, it kind of like left it like shortened and not to really express. So I do have cards that we try every night. So it's like usually at this time, like I tell him like pull out a card. So it's like they're helping to have conversation. So not only I provide the card for him. I'll tell him that, we'll alternate when we pick the
Mm-hmm.
cards. So,
Mm-hmm.
cards is like, what is your desires?
Yes.
Or, random questions. Like if you wanted to go to a trip and it was like your favorite place, where that will be. So these are like ways of helping the
Mm-hmm.
conversation to discuss. But I love that, he was irritated at one point and not understand like why he was just like a little annoyed with Talia. So we had to sit down, and it was all because when he came home from the bus one day, instead of his routine of going in through the front door, she told him to go to the side door because she saw him from the side through the driveway. And he's been bottled up with this whole emotion for like 6 months in. So we had to sit down and tell him like, like, oh, like I don't think she did that intentionally, because he was like, she just told me to go, and it was just stopped him in his routine
Mm-hmm.
track. And when he mentioned that, I understood what the emotion was, and then we addressed it, and then he paused, and then he felt very emotional because now he realized he hold all this animosity for her, and all she was doing was just making sure he was okay and that he came in
Yes.
the correct way. So he apologized with her, and I mean, it was a whole emotional moment because she never saw him emotional, and he really full heartedly like felt bad.
Aw.
And he was like, "I didn't know that you was caring, he was concerned." He was like, "I really thought that you just telling me what to do." And she was like, "No, it was just really making sure that you was okay." And she was like, "Hey, like next time, if you prefer to go through the front, just let me know." And it's like allowing them to know that they have a voice.
And it's the social cues, understanding and knowing that it's okay that sometimes you might feel a way, you might not understand what's going on, but it's okay to question it. It's okay to come to us and say, hey, something happened and this is how I'm feeling. And for us, I do have a subscription box where we have those expression cards that you're talking about that we give to parents is to help them to deal with the expressions and the social cues and what to do. And we have like little cues where you spin them. Can't wait for us to come back on again. Tristan gonna tell you he is 18 now, so be prepared. Be prepared. He's gonna say he's 18 now. But we want to thank everyone for joining us. So thank you for sitting down with me, and you have a great night. Say hello to Mr. Tristan.
Tell Trey I said hello as
Oh,
well.
the two T's, Trey and Tristan.
Two T's, right?